Starmer staying or going really won't make much difference to Labour, and it definitely will not make any difference to the country. I think this is something that is underappreciated by many in the Labour Party. The problem is their worldview is completely and utterly incompatible with the direction that the country needs to go in order to heal and grow and actually improve. But actually, also on top of that, is completely counter to where the majority of the public is now moving. What I mean by that is if you look at polling on everything from migration to even whether or not taxes should go up, the public mood is moving very clearly in the opposite direction. Replacing Starmer may give them a minor uplift, but anyone new who comes in will still have to deal with that reality. But also the fact that the overall Labour Party is functionally broken as a party. It never made the compromises required to actually govern seriously. It spent 14 years screaming evil Tories rather than looking at the world and actually discovering and the direction it's going in and what they would need to form a coherent governing strategy. Wes Streeting gave the game away anyway when he did his political manoeuvres and released his messages to Peter Mandelson when he said very clearly there is no growth strategy. Now, without a growth strategy, you are relying ever more on taxing the productive members of society ever more, which is a problem because they make up a declining share of the population because people are leaving, but also more and more people have just given up and have decided that they may as well take welfare. On top of that, you have a public sector where productivity has been stagnant for going on nearly 20 years, which means every time the public sector needs to do more things, the only way you can do that is to increase spending on it. So these two things act as a continual drag on the economy, because between them it requires and drives ever higher tax take from us, the productive few. And I don't know about you or I, but I'm getting rather bored of it. And I'm a social democrat and largely believe in a mixed economy. For those on the right, I would imagine they are well and truly fed up with it, particularly as they look on at a state which is now bloated, inefficient, incompetent, and guided by a political class who simply have no interest in actually dealing with our problems. Starting with obviously growth that we've just covered off, but also a crime wave, collapse in prisons, a healthcare system that's simply not up to anything anymore, roads that don't get repaired, litter, antisocial behaviour, functionally broken institutions like social services across most of the councils, and so much more. A new Labour leader won't fix any of those things. They can't fix any of those things. And so we stagger on. I think what's telling about this event, what's telling about actually what's going on in the country, is actually the rampant disinterest in the subject, even from people like myself who I refer to myself as a political junkie. I don't care. I know it doesn't make any difference. It's marginally interesting around the edges, but gone are the days where I used to have that passion and interest in the intricacies of what's going on. I don't care. The British state, the British democratic system is now so hopelessly broken that, to be honest, this is all an irrelevance. And I think that the smarter politicians are starting to grasp that. Certainly, if you looked at the latest polling and group research that Dominic Cummings has done, what comes through very clearly is a public that is well and truly fed up with it, fed up with the games, fed up with the fact that the political class don't want to concentrate on the things that actually matter to them, and a growing rage at the whole thing. And I think that rage is going to come out at this rate, particularly as I think that it's now odds on that we are heading towards some sort of fiscal event. What I mean by fiscal event, it's probably going to be some sort of bond market strike. That is, that people refuse to lend to the British government because of the complete incoherence of their economic policy. And I use policy in the loosest possible terms, the decisions they're making. They are looking at the growth of the welfare state, from pensions to disability to special educational needs spending, through to unemployment benefit and so much more. And more are starting to realise that this just can't go on. And I think it's highly likely that you'll see an event where the bond market simply strike. And what I mean by strike is they'll still lend to us, but they will only lend to us at a much, much higher rate. You saw this briefly, the beginnings of it under the trust budget, but majority of the trust budget was actually due to LDI, an actual financial crisis. Park that. I think if that happens, then there would have to be an emergency budget. If there was an emergency budget, that would basically mean that they would have to do emergency cuts and tax rises again, probably majority of it cuts, because simply put, the economy cannot take more tax rises. It has become a vicious downward circle where they tax more, growth slows, so they tax more and growth slows. And this is what's so frustrating about the Labour government as we speak. They know it can't go on, but the party is so utterly incoherent and unable to accept the reality that we live within that they won't countenance any real change. And that means that when the emergency budget comes along, should the emergency budget have to happen after a bond strike, the actual pain and suffering to some of the most vulnerable in society will be far, far worse. Because at that stage, you won't be able to make a logical decision to cut here, trim there, do what's required. It will simply be hack and slash, 10% here, 20% there. And the damage will be incalculable. Farage gets this, which is why Farage has already opened up applications for people who want to run in the forthcoming election. He, like myself, I think clearly believes that 2027 is a likely year where there will be an election, and he needs to get his house in order. I just hope that there is someone behind or alongside Danny Kruger who is actually starting to come up with proper policies, the policies that this country needs, not the populist slop that unfortunately most of the parties are producing now on a near daily basis. We need grown-up policy making because we're in a very serious moment in our national history. Hard decisions will have to be made. But to govern is to choose, and this is something I think that politicians have refused to do for going back 20, 25 years. They have thought of themselves as managers rather than governors. They have thought of themselves as people who have worked within the rules rather than setting the rules. And that's not what parliamentary system does or is. We need serious people. We need to get on with this, and they will have to make serious choices, and those choices will have to be explained to a public. They will have to be explained to the public that there is no more money, that the only cuts that can really be made now are to the welfare state, and that will need to be balanced with probably more investment in places to get people back into work. There will need to be a pretty much hard stop on inward migration to ensure that there are relevant jobs available for people to be pushed into. It would actually also help to sort much of our migration problem, because it's my personal belief that when you turn off many of the benefits, a lot of people will probably just leave. Hard decisions, governing, that's what it is. And that's where we're going to. So no, I'm not really interested in the Starmer situation. I'm barely interested in Labour and the government in general. I feel little but contempt these days for much of the parliamentary system and the people who work within it. How can you not, when you see day in, day out now, nearly another rape, another attack by migrants in this country, and they all look the other direction, or the way that they even now they turn slightly white if you mention the Pakistani rape gangs, or if you even mention the idea that you may want to cut benefits or anything else. We need change. We're going to have to change because the status quo just no longer works. It doesn't work economically. This glide path only ends in a brick wall or a cliff. It doesn't work socially because I don't know about you, but I don't even recognise this country anymore. It is squalid. It is materially squalid. When you walk out down your street, it is socially squalid. We used to be a high trust society, and that has been obliterated by the choices that the political classes have made. And a huge part of that blame does indeed still go to the Tories, because it was under them and that 14 years that a huge portion of this actually happened and was allowed to bed in. And lastly, it is politically squalid. We have Z-grade nobodies infesting Parliament. Most of these people shouldn't be running a McDonald's, let alone sitting in the Parliament of one of the most important countries on the planet. We deserve better. I want better. You want better. And I've had enough. I really, really have. And if it requires a financial crisis to get change, then so be it. I don't want it. I don't want the pain that it's going to inflict on some of the most hard up and really struggling people here. But if that's what requires to put us on a better path, then so be it. Because apparently it looks ever more like that the system is not going to change without an external crisis, without other people basically turning around to us, turning around to our political elites and basically saying enough is enough, you cannot go on this way. So watch your space.